I'd like to cover a few topics today, first of which will be the direction of the channel going forwards. If you've noticed, I haven't put out a lot of videos recently, and I've been, well, apart from being busy and focused on other things, I've been struggling with what the identity of this YouTube channel should be. And although I get the most clicks and likes for running content about Dungeons and Dragons and Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, in a lot of ways this content bugs and bothers me because it's not where my true passion lies, and I'm doing it in a sort of backhanded way to talk about mechanisms and ideas for what the ideal role-playing game should be. How do we structure time? How do we measure action? What do statistics do? At what point do dice interact with the narrative? What's the correct method for handling social checks, etc., etc.? What type of gamers exist, and how do we ensure that the role-playing experience is streamlined? And that's the holy grail that I've been seeking and developing for many years. And I sometimes find that the banal conversations about the nuance of rules that I get dragged into with Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition and that type of content is just frankly, it's sort of maddening and discouraging, because I don't believe that the artificial structures that are created around Dungeons and Dragons truly are helping the hobby move forward. I don't want to respond to one D&D. I even had a script talking about the rulings about invisibility and all these things, and the sophistry that's coming out from the people who support this game. I'm just so not interested in that. But there are things that I am interested in. I'm interested in taking the hobby back to its roots, back to what is the promise of a role-playing game, how can we make a role-playing game play fast and fun, and how do we give players and moderators the tools to resolve action in a way that works for them. There's a certain amount of control that I want to give to the moderator, the person running the game, and give her those tools so that she can express her creative genius with her friends. And I also want to give power to people to create content. I think Dungeons and Dragons, and if 2022 has taught us anything, is that these companies, the big companies, aren't the ones creating the good content for role-playing games, even though they're the ones making the money. None of the Dungeons and Dragons modules actually comes from their design team, and everything that we see is so derivative. It's actually small individual game design people and people who are passionate about role-playing games who are making the interesting and excellent stories. And we looked at things like Pathfinder and Pathfinder Savage Worlds. Pathfinder has always done a much better job at creating adventures than the core Wizards of the Coast team, even though the rule system is highly derivative and built upon assumptions created in the Dungeons and Dragons milieu. So what my message to you is, number one, I'm sorry I haven't put out any content. I've been struggling to figure out what it is I want to say in these little YouTube things. I've been continuing to work and continuing to hone the modules and continuing and by modules, I don't mean adventure, I mean the rules modules, which is, I believe, a modular approach to role-playing design is absolutely essential in the same ways that you'd build up modules in programming. You develop little subroutines or processes and procedures that are universal and work well. So I'm sorry I haven't been putting out content. I've got some content for you, and we'll show you some of the things that are exciting, and really I hope 2023 really shows to be the year of test play, and I want to start running the live test plays and showing you guys what I'm talking about, because we're gaming at the speed of sound. That's the promise of Mach 1 Games, is to show you something that you have not seen before, that is not derivative from, you know, second edition Dungeons and Dragons and then riffs on it. It's cutting it back to its core. It's just as much a GURPS derivative or a Rolemaster derivative. I looked at what was going on there and said, you know what? Let's cut it all back and go back to the essential questions. What is a role-playing game? What does a perfect session look like? How do we make it quick and easy for the players to translate their desires and to get results coming back to the moderator? How do we model that? And also, how do we avoid that problem that comes up sometimes when people are game designing? They over-design the dice mechanism so that the dice mechanism becomes the game, and the mechanistic nature of the game is good for gamers, but it's not good for narrativists and simulationists, because then the focus becomes, what's my method of resolving this action, rather than, I want to be facing down that dragon on the strange bridge that is howling in the wind, and the rain is pelting me, and I can feel the emotion and the presence of the moment, and then the dice just help me resolve and move on through the action, and it's quick and it's fast, but it's nuanced enough so that strategy is enabled for the players. That's one of the things that is maddening about role-playing games, where they have a whole series of mechanisms built around combat, but when it comes to any type of social interactions, it's not worth playing the game, because the dice take over and the dice do too much. They undo the work of the players, and it becomes an ROLL playing game, and that's not what we want. So I don't want to spend too much time meandering with my meandering thought on this one. It's just a quick check-in and an apology. So to those people who have joined this channel expecting that I will be producing more content about little rules foibles in Dungeons and Dragons, I'm sorry if I've misled you or misdirected you. I don't want you to unsubscribe, but if that's not what you're interested, if not what you're shown up for, please, I want this channel to be the boutique bougie experience for those people who are interested in the nuts and bolts of role-playing games and role-playing theory, to find a new way to have experiences at the table. For those of you who are content creators, I hope that I will be able to give you something soon that allows you to create your own role-playing game out of the structures that I've given you, and choose systems and rules modules. You can tweak them to control the experience that you want. For those moderators who want to give their players a fresh new experience that's fast and fun, this I know will be what you've been looking for. We can do task resolution, we can do action resolution, you can change both grid and space and time to match the relevance or how much time you want to spend on it. We have both turn and non-turn based mechanism. It's all based off of a core, and then you can build the measures of statistics that are relevant for the type of game that you want to run. But I'm going to give you 3 very different concrete examples of role-playing systems based off the Mach 1 game engine plus the Mach 1 game engine, so that you can then riff from that. And that's where that's my sort of love letter to this hobby. Is I think it can be so much more. I think it's so exciting that we don't have to be saddled with the paralysis of turn-based mechanisms all the time. We've got methods of breaking out of it, and then we've got methods of doubling down on it and making it all make sense, quick and fast and easy. And I'm just going to leave you on one note so that we actually have some new content to think about. I've recently been reading the Dave Duncan series, A Man of His Word. It's a little bit different from the type of fantasy literature that I read. We have, fauns and Jotun and dwarves. It's almost set in a fairy tale world. But the thing that got me thinking is the mechanism of magic. And to borrow from Dave Duncan, this could be an excellent mechanism of magic for a fantasy role-playing game. And the premise is this, that there are words of power. And a word of power is a secretly guarded word, often passed down through heredity from fathers to sons or fathers to daughters. And the power of a word of power, the more people that it's shared with, the more the power is shared or dispersed. And words of power themselves try to keep themselves hidden. Now, the person who knows a single word of power, I believe, is called an adept. It's got different ranks, but the more words of power that you know, the more powerful that you are. So somebody who has 4 or 5 words of power becomes a sorcerer and is super powerful in the world. So it gives you first this gradation, maybe 6 or 7 ranks. So let's talk about that as a concept for a role-playing game, that we already have this leveling sort of system, that words of power. And words of power enhance somebody's innate abilities. And I think with a role-playing system, one of the interesting things is that with the word of power mechanism, then you can explore what those different words can do, and maybe there's abilities associated with them, rather than the way the books go is, well, they enhance your natural traits or something. There's something here. There's something here. Now, the other thing that becomes very interesting is you're always trying to learn new words. Once you've understood the concept of words of power, and try to wheedle the words of power out from other people. But obviously, you don't want to give up your word of power, because number one, sharing the word is going to make that word less powerful. And once you've shared the word, people would, go after you, attack you, kill you, and then they become more powerful because now they're no longer sharing the word. So words are these jealously guarded secrets. And a couple of corollaries, I thought, we could have ghosts created by people who pass away without passing on their word of power, because the words of power want to be known by maybe 1 or 2 people. So it's an interesting mechanism to have this sort of internal word of power magic system. And I was just wanted to ask the channel if you guys had any ideas. I'm not going to get myself distracted and build this in as a magic system for any of the three worlds, or overlapping small, and I hesitate to call them worlds, because I'm doing a small community. Again, with the idea that I want to give to you, the fans of role-playing games. There are no fans of Beyond the Role-Playing Game yet. Hopefully at some point you guys can become fans when you see what it is. But fans of role-playing games, what I want to give them is a small slice of a world, an isolated kingdom, or a couple of kingdoms that are isolated in a high valley, who have just legends of the outside world, because that isolated section then get slotted into any type of world that you want and you can imagine, and eventually be subsumed by your paradigms and your ideas. So I'm looking just to get some feedback on what you think we might want to do with Dave Duncan's Words of Power ideas, if you were going to turn that into a role-playing system of magic. And you know, you can talk about healing factors or different types of words, or maybe there's a low-level words that you can use. And there's something here that I find innately intriguing that also goes to what makes magic a scarce resource, which is sort of an essential ingredient for a magic system. The other thing that it gets away from is there's a rather odious legacy in role-playing games and fantasy literature. Excuse me, really. It's in fantasy literature, and then it spills into role-playing games. The idea that there's a hereditary value with certain people and certain families being worth more or more special than others. And this is, you know, this great lie that's perpetuated all over the place in every hereditary monarchy there ever was. But the fact that there's the more special people, the Words of Power gets away from that in such a clever way, which is, yes, there may be families who had held power for generations, but they hold power because they have this secret, this power that's not endemic to them, that is a secret or a wealth that they pass or share amongst themselves. And then you can get all the betrayals and family lines getting derailed over this essence, this resource, these words of power that come through the world. So if you guys have any comments or ideas about how you might make that into that magic system part of one of your worlds, or if that inspires you to create something great, and once you're inspired to create your fantastic new world, boy, do I have a role-playing system that can do this stuff for you. I can guarantee you 2023 you're going to be able to see a system that gives you real quick, concrete ways of resolving role-playing action that's going to be fast, it's going to be intuitive for you, and it's just going to be way more fun for your players to not get bogged down when they don't need to be bogged down. You'll have control of the clock, which is, I think it's the essential thing that role-playing games have been missed, is they build an artificial clock at the core of the system, and then everything from that point forward is artificial, because you have to build it from the artificial clock going forward. And once we have an action engine like we have in Beyond the Role-Playing Game, then that action engine then gives us structure, allows us to set a clock, set a pace, and then perform the bit of simulation required to let people's imaginations run wild so that they can actually attend to things, which means that they're attending their focus to resolve action, and you don't get the tyranny of these. These are beautiful things. These are fun things. They can help generate excitement. But I think what's happened is that their role in role-playing games has been subverted. That rather than these beautiful little cubes of randomness, they're no longer tethered to... They do a poor job of making us believe that they're tethered to an underlying reality of a world that could be. And that's the promise we want to get back to. Let's make our little math cubes sing. That's it. That's me. Here is to 2023. Happy New Year, everyone. Goodbye.